Gilg Jew, Gilg J as Gilg Nerach.
As dan Kjol Shaw, de Chorendut, well, Trish Orm, de wel Chorendut, Claare Shaw, Claare Gael, as we Valiam Aldiger. My name is Robert Cattin Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Have I heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
And I'd like to welcome you to this bilingual programme, Claare Gael, with part of it in the English language, as leis Perchi Sagilg, and with part of it in the Manx Gaelic, Chinian Amera, the mother tongue of Elin Banning, the Isle of Man. As Mabanach Dutrish, William Gell's poem Man in Veg Veen, a poetic sketch of the Isle of Man, closed in Castle Rushen. In old newspaper reports, there's something else involving Castle Rushen which we'll look at this time. Although it's unpleasant, I think it's right to look as well at the grittier side of the island's history. To skil elia ons tjaglen na Brothers Grimm vis maier ende slaierliam, sjen mechon kjoledren Baljach Bremen. Ta adel chit de wees sjaan as an noon, as te foon bansjerege ibert mache, maar so ten adel rijer che, de Holges Bremen. Manx musician Matt Claare is a multi-instrumentalist, singer, writer of songs, of which this is one. Slightly adapting a Manx place name, it's called Cerocod. Tawys geestiach rys radio banning stasiwn yn asiwn, rys gyller sgeliamach fai dwlish alion banning.
There's an anger in the sky and a fear within my heart. I watch the seasons pass me by until the winter calmed my mind, and the lights of Carricot, they shine so brightly from the tiny windows distant on the hill. Though the wind may push and swell and fight against me, I'll be home tonight because you're waiting still. You're waiting still. I will stumble in the night, I will scream into the wind, my body bleeding from the fight, but together we will win. And the lights of Carricot, they shine so brightly from the tiny windows distant on the hill. Though the wind may push and swell and fight against me, I'll be home tonight because you're waiting still. You're waiting still. Turn in my love, turn there's a place I can call home, I must travel strong and fast, for a savage winter comes, and the lights of Carricard, they shine so brightly from the tiny windows distant on the hill. Though the wind may push and swell to fight against me, I'll be home tonight because you're waiting still. You're waiting still.
Matt Claare and his song Kerricard. This is from the Manx Sun of the 4th of September 1832. Robbery and attempted murder. On Wednesday night last, the 29th of August, between 12 and 1 o'clock, William Kinley, Esquire, advocate, was attacked on Peel Quay by a man of the name of Siddleton, a blacksmith, who seized him by the throat. Mr. Kinley, however, succeeded in throwing down the ruffian and kept him in this position when an accomplice of the name of Moore now came up and struck Mr. Kinley so desperate a blow across the small of the back with a bar of iron as to deprive him of all further power of defence. He also received some injury about the head while lying in this state. The robbers then tore off the lap of his coat, which contained £38 in banknotes, and from their conversation, which Mr. Kinley overheard, they supposed he was dead. Shortly after they'd left him, he reached his own residence with great difficulty, when medical assistance was procured. Tanadl chit mór vis na lai panduch ag chawn na réide, as tan mór greid a leshen shan as begabai son an chelg, as de vil a bainches on Maraway. Be raya che, ach na rau fissege achterby de chas na ugid bay. Ten adel korlige day de chit merish gus Bremen de weinig jolle der Baljach. Ten adel greide wel eschen heen klei a lute, as de boddigen morde in zich een achter klei a drum. Maar zo dat gulle red koejach tret a chit der ket na heis a red, as jean getrai as 3 leien vlioch. Te chit maakte wel a ket, chit shan nish, as na wel na fielen egge gebirrig as wat. Sherlesh besail jorish an och, as cronena, na rai me geert luk na luchie. Ve foe banasje kore de ve bite, maar zoren in raier che. Ach te gagen na wel kor meire getten, as na wel vissegge na weg en erriegge. Ten adel korlige edechit merugus Bremen, no de wel tiggele zegge, Gael kjoli. Now, the devil, of course, lives up country over the border in England, but this song is about his coming over the border into Cornwall and visiting Lanson.
Old Nick, as he was wont to do, went wandering up and down to see what mischief he could brew and made for Lanson town. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and call and pen, and one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. Across the Tamer he has come, though you might think it strange, and having left his Devon home, tried Cornwall for a change. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and call and pen, and one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. Now when to Lanson he drew near, a skipping o'er the sod, he spied a rustic cottage there with windows all abroad. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and call and pen, and one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. And in the kitchen might be seen a dame with knife in hand, who cut and slashed and chopped, I ween, to make a pasty grand. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and call and pen, and one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men.
Good morning, missus, what is that? Of all sorts 'tis a dog. There's beef and mutton, pork and fat, potatoes, meats and squab. Or 'tis fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men.
A Cornish pasty, sure, says she, and Eftha doesn't mind. I soon shall start to cut up thee and put thee in, you'll find. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. In fear he turned and straight did flee to cross the Tamar Quay. And since that day in Cornwall he has never more been seen. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. For it is fish and tin and copper boys, tree and poll and pen. And one and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men.
Sue White and Gareth Hedges and the song celebrating Tree as Poll as Pen. One and all we may rejoice that we are Cornish men. That's fish and tin and copper. Van ket Jinu Moor Jane I, as Mursaw Haya Meru. Lurg Shen Hai na Tree Troilty Sha close, as for Kellach na Haya Yat, as Gerum lesh Ulju and Yard. Tan aim and ed de loer de jaren trud krauwe smeur door de nadel, kere de jinnewoord. Tammy a goor feestens Irish bij son luil murren a sanish, de wat uljen a linten vei niet as chermich, as nish morre jiduni hig shezach, as ten vanasje an instant hogere de wel fame jinnu au regime, as fast the beg Jew, being wannel fast it em. Masaw tabby gerum la shully manyard, couch the false able them. Ford and a share berge de han, de gol meren, Michelach doet an adel, te shingen gulgus bremen. Eg a goed slew being a share getting bess. Te corel ledger ed, as tret as shnulju kjola kujak ni shen ko bri my day. Morsaw en a kellach cordale, as hired rumbu ulju na kierjow. The next morning, Thursday the 30th of August, information was given to the authorities of this most brutal attack, and Singleton, as is given here, having called him Siddleton earlier, and Siddleton it should be, so I'll change it to that, and Siddleton, who was well known to Mr. Kinley, was apprehended in his bed, and was induced to give up £20, being his share of the booty, telling the constable that James Moore, later Constable of Peel, had the remainder. Moore was then apprehended, and both prisoners, being handcuffed and strongly guarded, were committed to Castle Rushen. Mr. Kinley, we are happy to say, is slowly recovering. Now, I wondered if this person called Siddleton is the same one who was a leader of a riot in Peel in 1821, when the island's landowners were attempting to ship out grain from Peel Harbour to get a good price on the British market, but leaving thereby the island without flour for the dietary staple of bread. At that time, the name given to the leader of the rioters was either Shimin or Settleton, which seems an unlikely mix-up of names somehow. musicians from County Clare, Bobby Gardner on melodeon, Jack Talty on concertina, and Geraldine Cotter on piano. But strangely enough, the pieces they were playing, we heard the end of The Humours of Glendart. Glendart is in Cork. And we also played the Mullingar Races. But as I say, all three of those musicians that we heard there, Bobby Gardner, Jack Talty, and Geraldine Cotter, they're in fact from the County Clare.
Station, Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwn tyn sio radio fannin, as on sio tawas geis jachrish Claare na Gael, as mishta the chebbel, Robert Gooding Corwell, Robert a Corslach.
Have you heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
Ma visu golgus in a dega radio vanning as brewer kraman eish rish, ta dutch clash and Claare na Gael rish shachten, lugchi guller scalia mach and chid. The podcast regaden nasty Jane Claare nies, rish trud in a dega radio vanning, na trud kerederen podcast elia, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, na Alexa. Now, back in 1821, when the riot leader Seddleton was brought to court, he became violent, and Deemster Gaun, Thomas Gaun, left the bench to assist in overpowering him. This became a well-known tale, appearing in one of Dusty's, that's Dusty Miller, Dusty's It's a Fact cartoons of the 1940s. I think they were in the Manx newspapers. They were made in the style of Robert Ripley's Believe It or Not, which started out just before Christmas in 1918 and is still a popular franchise, still going, Ripley's Believe It or Not. But Dusty's cartoon and the story with it suggested, well, I suppose you'd call it a victory for Deemster Gaun, as it were. However, after Seddleton had been locked up, a crowd descended and broke open the cell and let him out. And then Deemster Gaun and the other officials were forced to ride off with an angry crowd at their heels and amid a hail of stones. So a rather ignominious exit for the establishment, despite the way the story was handed down. But as I say, that rioter was Seddleton, it gives his name as, leaving aside the name Shimmin. And 9 years later, here's a Siddleton. And Siddleton, this is again in Peel. So I was wondering, is this perhaps the same man? But then I thought, no, they'd have cited the record, surely, his criminal record, if that was the case. But someone from the same family, perhaps. Ach, for Bremen, raud, vau, de rosh ne ons onlai. As chit gesenjaste beg renked keel. As ons shen ren het rege de gauwen nee. Ren an adel as a moda lai shees for William Moore. Ren a ket cost na soes master de banglenen. As jettel het kellach soskes a ver. An oder au shen de bal smoes out er aan. Rosh me ren e corre heen de gadle. Iche ulje me gierte mush, ges keer urgen a chombes. As honneke bol en jach soelbouw, seilsje beg be seilsjeen. As dilje maag na komregen egge der au taai on genauris, der au vode soel, node dat ik vagen seilsje. Maar zo doet een adel. Ber doen iri is golges sen, node een jou houren eich sjo. Ren de mode gol toiach der smunjen de beg kius de grauwen. Der au de bollig loom, J. Myers day. As gauw het olje toiach der golrum boog is een nerdven seilje. It's off to the lake of the Little Peak now, Llyn van Vach, in the Brecon Beacons, in the company of Welsh singer Mary Matthias.
Between the burrows she places her narrow eyes upon his. The bridge between worlds, this time she returns with a hidden kiss. Upon the watered land, a ring upon her hand, where will their bond be tampered with? The distant dimension, the lover's intervention, run away before the door opens on the tidal y ton o gerddi maith, y môr sy'n galw'r
Van Bach. And that's the Lake of the Little Peak. And there's a folk tale associated with it about a beautiful girl who arose from the lake, a lady of the lake. And although she was a supernatural being, she married a local man. But in fact, there was a condition which he didn't meet, and later she left him to go back to the lake. Although she did return again to help her 4 sons, and they went on to become famous doctors in the court of the king. So that's Llyn y Van Bach, and we heard Mary Matthias singing that. Des yn saich yn y smw as na sgilia, dera fy yera reneli jailad gus tai, belesh rwys der, as fe ledden hai shenach. Hai an adel van versliura gus yn unig, as ich is diach on. Cartesh gyda tau fagan, fraya moda. Cyrryd tam ei fagan, dregar an adel, on sio ta bwrt jint erlw le stw yndysach the I as the you, as ta rw steren then saiega, as jynnoed hien fi sour. Vech shen ledden chwy dingen door de kellach. Vech de jaru, balium de rausjen on shen door de adel. Esch ren het goil korl na maastok mach jou na naach jynnig et shit jou, ons gedden de roesteren maag as a taai. As verjere henket plan. Jinnach an adel, korne kadden tosjege liak an unjeg. Jinnach a mode drappel soes moen an adel. Berge ket moen a wode, as verjere jinnach a kellach etlach soes de beide jadu kjon a het. The Manx Advertiser says that William Kinley had just returned from Douglas, and after the attack, he lay, to all seeming, lifeless, and this circumstance it was which saved him. Otherwise, it was the intention of the robbers to have thrown him over the quay, as one of the party was heard suggesting to his fellow, who replied that he was dead enough already. So Siddleton and Moore were arrested, it says, along with Siddleton's wife as an accomplice, being the treasurer of the booty. There is reason to apprehend that these are but a part of a gang, from the expression of one of the prisoners upon his entrance into the jail, who declared there were 5 more yet to come. The Manx Sun describes the court case, and William Kinley said that the struggle lasted from 15 to 20 minutes. 2 of the guards en route to Castle Rushen said James Moore told them that rather than William Kinley, he thought it was a man called Robert Douglas with whom he'd fallen out some time before. Still, to fall out with somebody, it's not really the course of action, is it, to run up and hit them with a bar of iron, as he had done, thinking it was Robert Douglas, but it turned out to be William Kinley. Now, last time I managed to repeat a not uncommon misperception, but a misperception nevertheless. Roy Murdoch Buchanan Williamson, of the Corries, who wrote Flower of Scotland, was not related to Robin Duncan Harry Williamson of the Incredible String Band, whose October song we heard. Well, this is Roy Williamson and Ronnie Brown with Roy's song, The Hills of Ardmore. Ardmore?
I could hear the birds again in the fields of Ardmore, where the sun lies over Scalamvia. And the mist silent all around. Oh, that I could see the bracken red in the hills of Ardmorn, and the moss green in between, and the rain falling softly down. That I could send the breeze again in the fields newly turned, and the storm clouds high above, gulls circling all around. Oh, that I could hear the birds again in the fields of Ardmore, where the sun lies over Scalamia, and the mist silent all around.
The Corries, Roy Williamson and Ronnie Brown, had Roy's song The Hills of Ardmorn. The court case didn't include Catherine Siddleton, who'd been arrested at the same time as her husband, so it was evidently decided there was no case against her. And a news article having suggested her as the treasurer holding the stolen money. In fact, the money was found hidden up the chimney in the back kitchen of the Siddleton house, and it was just her husband Thomas Siddleton and James Moore who were tried. The Manx Sun says that the jury, after retiring for a short time, returned a verdict of guilty against both the prisoners, but recommended them to mercy. This produced an extraordinary sensation in court, all being aware of the awful sentence that must follow that verdict. His Honour, Deemster Christian, then proceeded to address the unfortunate men on the awful situation in which they then stood, and, after dwelling on the enormity of the offence, the necessity there was of putting a stop to crime, and to preserve the lives and property of the public, told the unfortunate men that their days were numbered. Trefyshen Jintoch, cawr rechit rolau, renned ulju goel toiach der choliachok. Renne adel, kene, renne moder gaunsterni, renne ket fisige, as renne kellach germ. Eis rennet brisje stjaagse chamber, de rennet smoshel ulju na kernen de glonne. Renne roes der een tje egen air aglach, smonneer den glaasjen en jach woon, as renne tje ges a geel, as odsen aglich as de bollach. Eis renne keer cum regen, sai schies ege boer, as rennet goil in rai je kuja warne lunje, as rennet goil soilje jen wie, mor de bech agres oru rish mee. As treffer de chorkioner zijn, rennet moechene seichigen, as ren kaach shir a bol de gadle, va koei den duches, as van a oceanegge, as den a oceanegge. Huggen adele hien de lai schies tjau moei a torren. Van moorde tjau chulu jen doris. Van ket a tjollach ljorishen lai tje, as ren de kellach hien sauer salaut. And that's Bagad Kemper in a piece under the title Chal a Dichal, which is Breton meaning flowing and ebbing, so a reference to the tide, but it seemed to be roaring in at a very fast pace there.
A breath of fresh air.
Manx Radio.
Siodat stasiwn yn asiwn radio fanning a sé Claare na Gael vis reclash and cartnish, mer and peen Robert Gatin Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Did the other hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
Nod rawad you ski lurg and journal Jaurock, henk cadla horror de leer. Trevich it fagest and veni, as honnig na rooster and father Jane tie, the row sai Jane ragen, as the row de chuljurid Jane de vacuum. Door de captain ocru, the rowie smunion the row de ryer che gin or, as dinche de fairjow, the hull as the yinu speak airs. Maar so high fairjow as hure macht the row de chuljurid leden hune. Highest jachs a chamber early, do de pert de hollis. No de rowie shielden de row sulien lonrige as no de rowie shielden de row sulien lonrige eilache get nins maregen bio, renne kummel foden dou, do de. Ach renne ket, de row kunt monage maar spotch, limme soes neddenegge, as renne kjou sheliori, as renne skridde. Skridde, Esh dilly, skridde en edin, shannon or remi screw renne skridde. Esh dilly a rooster, mag foal, as renne rai onzeep de cause na mag as doris na coolia. Ach, ren na morde, van a lion shen, rai ersen, as renne grema a lurge. The Manx Sun is reporting on what Deemster John Christian said after the guilty verdict against Thomas Siddleton and James Moore. Despite the jury's recommendation to clemency, he was obliged to sentence them to death, but he said that he was happy to find that there were so many good and pious characters in this town and neighbourhood who would afford them every religious consolation and enable them to make their peace with God. He then asked the prisoners severally why sentence of death shouldn't be passed on them. Siddleton said, "I never saw the man, I never touched the man, I know nothing about it." Moore said, "I hope the court will have mercy on me. I have a wife and a large family of small children. For them I hope you will have mercy." The prisoners were then sentenced to be hanged on Thursday the 18th of October. Both of the men appeared affected on hearing the sentence. I think you would be, wouldn't you? Now, Paul Reynolds hosts many of the musical days and evenings in various venues round Peel, and this is one of his own songs, Wave Song.
I'll be with my love.
Gael singing and playing his own composition, Wave Song. And Paul will be hosting a folk night in the Athol Room of the Centenary Centre in Peel this coming Friday, which in fact will be E. Howner and Hop Tournay. The Manx Sun continues. Immediately after the awful sentence of the law had been passed on the unfortunate men, Mr. Kinley, with feelings which reflect much credit on him, sent to His Honour the Governor a memorial, making a last effort for the royal clemency to be extended towards them. To the Honourable Lieutenant Governor Smelt, it's with a feeling of the most poignant affliction your memorialist has this day heard the awful sentence of the law passed on Thomas Siddleton and James Moore. Your memorialist ventures to hope some alleviation to the distress of his mind from the recommendation to mercy which accompanied the verdict of the jury. And your memorialist most cordially joins in that recommendation, and earnestly entreats your honour to forward this memorial with the sentence of the unhappy criminals to England. The certainty that their death would only entail upon your memorialist a lasting affliction emboldens your memorialist humbly to solicit your honour's interference to save their lives. As gouds van roest der rai through the close, liorische torren, ren een adel boele maag as hugge de breb moer lesje gas jeriege. As rinne kellach, as chit de vei doucht lesje nair, as gennacht en brioil de loer, illach maag cock-a-doodle-doo. Esh renne roest der kostne bach gomai as oddergeig as a captain egge, as door de och en nee, sa tai shen te butch grene, as jeni mi en ennelek erne, as na England en jaure ek ons me edin, as lorische doris te dunjen a jadu, ren sai mi sa lurge les skin, as onze gloos tan a lai bugen du, ren boele mi lesje lorg foy. As skin shen, a glay tan a high brew she, as de me maag, coramatura doos, as ma saw ren me rai, vien wal getavius van me able. Vien tre shen mage, ren de roestern coreber be ergol fagest en tai shen. Now these are the Cornish lovers of song, Caracana, with not a song but a chant in this case. This is Cornwall chant.
At the edges, that stamp of man in song of nature, like nowhere else will call me home. On the hill and in the valley, where'er my errant feet do take me, there Cornwall's heart beats through the rubble of mines and clay where men did work their lives. Sharp and strong, no sweet sighing, cliff edge winds are crying, still warm in heart am I to be here. Oh land, this land I do love thee. Love goes with me as I leave her, when restlessly I cross that river, but slowly seeps the cold of missing into my bones until they start to waste. Stroppy and untidy yet, beauty rough at the edges, that stamp of man in song of nature, like nowhere else will call me home.
Cornwall chant performed by the band Caracana. Ren na Cair Cumragan, Kjolder and Baljach Bremen, Feathen macht de rawad gesauer se vol badon, de renne tannachten on shen. As a pech ren inche skill shaw a chir sherry, te force bjor mort au fagen. Now, despite the jury's recommendation to mercy and the heartfelt plea of their victim, William Kinley, there was to be no reprieve for the 41-year-old Thomas Siddleton and the 37-year-old James Moore, though a bureaucratic formality meant execution was delayed by 4 days. They were hanged on a gallows erected on top of Castle Rushen on the 22nd of October 1832. As I said at the start, I think it's important to reflect that life in the island was not always the idyll that some commentators seem to suggest, and this unfortunate case is an example of that. As Vashene and son as the Jarut and Treyer jet son Jera Claare Sean yes, ach Hegirish son Shenazulio. Fiddle player Kieran O'Mweeney is from Donegal, and he's joined by Sean O'Graham and the piano of Liam O'Mweeney as they play Kitty O'Neill's to bring Claare Gael to a close. 2 hours of the best chill-out music is on its way from 7 to 9, presented by Chris Pearson, and at 9 Judith Lay will present Sundown. Now, next Sunday afternoon, La Sauna, the 1st of November, there'll be a presentation by Sue Woolley on her research into more Manx worthies, and that'll be at 2:30 in the Guild Room in Athol Street in Peel. All are very welcome. Ach, more migration, and so until the next time then, this is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert de Carslach.
Oh, Bobby Bob.
Wishing you a very good night, leave I my as that's my year and share.